Welcome back. Here at The Listening Post, we often report on the silencing of journalists and bloggers by intimidation or censorship, and how that affects what we see on our TV screens, read in our newspapers, or on the web. The huge show of solidarity for Alan Johnston has thrown the spotlight once again on the dangers facing journalists in the world's trouble spots. So far this year, 40 journalists have been kidnapped around the world. And according to the New York-based Committee to Protect Journalists, 25 have been killed this year while trying to cover the news. Meenakshi Ravi has this report on the most dangerous places in the world to tell it like it is.
Whether it's reporting Chechnya, China, or the war in Iraq, there is a crisis of violence facing journalists all around the world.
Intervening right now between the Palestinian brethren.
The global campaign to release Alan Johnston was celebrated by international media as a great success. Can that momentum be carried forward to help forgotten victims in other countries? Countries like Somalia.
Alan is working for reputable broadcaster BBC, but what do you think that the name of a Somali journalist, a local journalist who is arrested in Mogadishu and who's not working for international broadcaster, how he or she can get international campaign? It's very hard.
In March of this year, African Union troops went into Somalia to try and secure peace. The last 114 days have seen fierce gun battles in the capital, Mogadishu, with journalists caught in the crossfire.
There is no rule of law, there is a rule of gun. And as a journalist, you don't have a specific clan or a specific media which is going to protect you.
Across the whole Horn of Africa region, journalists are routinely detained. There are currently 13 journalists in prison in Ethiopia and 15 held incommunicado in Eritrea. In April of this year, Sir Kalam Fazil, who had given birth in prison, was finally released without charge after 18 months behind bars.
Some of them, like those arrested in Eritrea, they were arrested in mid-90s. Okay. So, and some of the journalists in Ethiopia, they were arrested in the recent general election. The campaign that has been made for Alan is a good example, and we need to make that. There is a campaign now launched by the International Federation of Journalists on release all African journalists in jail.
Journalists have also been campaigning in Mexico. It may come as a surprise, but Mexico is currently the second most dangerous place for journalists in the world after Iraq.
The image of Mexico, which is well deserved, it is a country that has done so much for itself over the last decades or so. And this is why it is so sad to see that where it comes to human rights protection, where it comes to the protection of the voices that are reporting on corruption, that are reporting on crimes, this is where the government is failing.
So far this year in Mexico, there have been 3 journalists murdered, 3 disappearances, and 2 attacks on media offices.
All kinds of threats, attacks, and assassinations of informants that are still going on. The authorities are not enforcing the law. That is why we are here, to demand they put a stop to these murders.
In April of this year, Amado Ramirez Dianes, a correspondent with Televisa, was assassinated in the center of Acapulco. A month earlier, he had aired a special investigation into local drug traffickers.
Allow me to insist that indeed, while the murders of journalists are probably linked to drug trafficking as far as we know, the overall situations of violence against journalists is, in the majority of the cases, can be linked to perpetrators being state officials. It is essential that the Mexican government use the tools at its disposal, including the special unit set up in 2006, to properly investigate at least some of the cases that are brought to its attention.
This campaign has already started, and we will continue with that as part of the family of the International Federation of Journalists. We are very optimistic that in the coming years, the situation of journalists in Africa will change, and journalists in Africa will start exercising their profession freely and without fear.
Meenakshi Ravi reporting. Now, if you want to find out what's coming up next in the world of new media, you can do no better than look at what's hot and what's not in South Korea. The world's most advanced new media lab with the highest penetration of broadband anywhere in the world. 89% of households have it, compared with just over 50% in US homes. South Korea has led the way with experiments in mobile TV, online gaming and social networking. It's also the place where the world's first news agency run entirely by citizen journalists was set up. 7 years on, Oh My News is mature enough to boast 60,000 correspondents and have its own conference to discuss, well, citizen journalism. Rory O'Connor is one of the founders of the US Media Watch website, mediachannel.org, and he's been to Seoul to see where this kind of journalism goes next.
Is journalism some sort of priesthood of professionals who venture Moses-like to mountaintops and then return to deliver the news as divinely revealed truth to the rest of us earthbound mortals? Or can anyone practice and commit acts of journalism?
I've never seen so many citizen reporters in a room at the same time. I don't know that there are this many citizen reporters anywhere in the world right now. So the people here are serious about journalism and want to try to make good journalism, and it's very unusual, and it's really interesting to see why they do it and how they've been successful.
The brainchild of Oh Yan Ho, a professionally trained Korean journalist, Oh My News was launched in February 2000, and it has grown rapidly since then. Today, it boasts nearly 60,000 citizen reporters worldwide who work closely with dozens of full-time staff members, creating content for websites in Korean, Japanese, and English.
I created Oh My News with the concept every citizen can be a reporter. So I want to take the citizen's voice and make it influence in making Koreans' public opinion.
Oh Yan Ho's vision of a global news organization manned by citizen journalists is ambitious, especially for a form of journalism still in its infancy.
The issues are becoming quite clear. It includes things like trust, accuracy, fairness, the principles of journalism that are not universally applied, and that I think need to be more universally applied for citizen journalism to be of the highest possible value.
The adoption of these values has led to a change in attitude towards citizen journalism on the part of traditional media.
Up until about a year ago, they were watching it as something that was kind of cute and maybe a bit of an annoyance. And now they're in a state of mild panic, and they are trying to embrace it as quickly as they can because they recognize that it's a way of connecting to their readers or former readers in many cases. And I think the expectation of readers these days that they can interact with the people who are telling them their news, so they kind of are forced to do it.
Can ordinary citizens actually function as journalists? Well, why not? I've been a professional journalist for many years. Yet I never took a course in it, never got a license for it, and I never got anointed on high. So here's my advice. If you don't like the news, report some of your own.
And that was Rory O'Connor reporting. And here's how our Global Village voices see that story.
Citizen journalism really has been one of the most disappointing pipe dreams of the 21st century so far in terms of media. There was such a big expectation that it would overtake the mainstream media and somehow provide a more credible and more transparent way of reporting the news. But in fact what it's become is really just a second-rate sideshow to the innovation that's going on in online traditional media at this moment.
Finally, if journalists decided to adopt a pet for their newsroom, what do you think it should be? A wild cat, perhaps, inspired by the former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who called the media feral beasts. Maybe an ostrich, or a snake, or even a bloodhound. Well, the entertainment desk at the state-funded Russia Today decided they'd adopt a cockroach, which the dictionary defines as a nocturnal insect which often feeds on the waste of others and can be a household pest. It must have been a very slow news day. See you next time at the Listening Post.
The cockroach race is not an Olympic game, but still it's a challenge. In the first stage, Russia Today's Antonina was about to be the first one to cross the finishing line, but she didn't cross it. Tensions grew high as they watched Antonina debate her direction. She turned back and scurried the other way. Luckily then she turned back again and was among the first three to finish.
This roach is in a very good shape. It looks sporty and fit, pretty big but not too fat. Look how quiet and polite she behaves. Isn't she intelligent?
In this race, however, our prize was a home bingo set for being second place. So if you ever need an advice on training cockroaches, address Russia Today's entertainment department.